Hello there, everybody, and welcome to the Talking City podcast, brought to you by the Manchester Evening News. My name is Dan Murphy, and joining me on this jubilant day for Manchester City is, of course, Mr. Joe Bray. Joe, how's it going?
Not too bad. It's been a nice, easy day because there's been a lot of stuff to write about, as we'll talk about. But I spent most of my day, I've got to be honest, looking at Patrice Evra absolutely losing his head on that interview. But no, I'm sure we'll find some other stuff to talk about.
Oh, we'll definitely touch on that, absolutely. But before, I just wish I'd have gone to your last, because I could have done a really good kind of segue into City not leaving some sort of excrement in the trousers this time. But instead, I have to first introduce Mr. Tyrone Marshall. Ty, how's it going?
Yes, very good. Thank you, Dan. Very good. Still buoyed by what we witnessed last night. It was pretty incredible, wasn't it?
Oh, it absolutely was. You know, me and City have one thing in common, if nothing else, and that is that we've packed our bags for a trip away, because City have, of course, booked tickets to Istanbul for the Champions League final on June 10th. It was an incredible night on Wednesday evening, a 4-0 victory over Real Madrid to win the semi-final 5-1 in aggregate. Ty, you was there, and what a just a remarkable night it was.
Yeah, it was just absolutely spellbinding, wasn't it? We've just been talking off air a little bit about how good it was, and it was a phenomenal performance. I'm not sure I can remember Guardiola's City playing better, certainly for the first 45 minutes. I thought that was up there with the stuff that his great Barcelona teams used to produce, when we all salivated over the quality of that Barcelona team. And at the risk of giving another publication some publicity, there's a good piece in the Times today about how we maybe don't do that with City because it's just so close to home, and we see them every week, but they deserved it last night because that 45 minutes was peak Barcelona for me. That's as good as Guardiola's teams get. I did my morning piece on it. I think it's about 3 weeks since he said perfection in football doesn't exist, but that 45 minutes is as close as you will ever get to it. We all know what Guardiola's like. I'm sure he's found several things from that first half that mean it wasn't quite perfect, but it was pretty close. It was just a phenomenal performance. It had everything. It was brave. The intensity for me was astonishing. The intensity with which they played this deep into a season. You know, I can remember just before the World Cup and Guardiola talking in press conferences saying we'll only know the effect it's had on players in April and May. Really, and for Europe, no one is at this level, not in terms of performance, but in terms of energy and intensity, and they're doing that with quite a small squad, and be something for the end of the season to kind of look at and assess what exactly they did to keep their players this fresh. But Real just couldn't live with them last night. It was remarkable. I mean, we're just saying that Real Madrid completed 13 passes in the first 15 minutes. You know, Real Madrid 13 passes with Modric and Kroos.
I can actually do one better. The half an hour mark, 30 minutes in, the passing stats came up, and Madrid at that point were averaging 1.5 passes per minute, which is just astonishing. I imagine City do that in a second.
Yeah. Well, I was just saying to Joe, it would be nice, when you're there at the game, you're obviously looking down occasionally and you're typing, but I want to watch the game back at some point, because it felt like there was a spell of 15 to 20 minutes where they literally didn't get out of their own half and they just couldn't get the ball forward. The quality of City's pressing was brilliant, but then as soon as they did go forward, as soon as they got it near halfway, Rodri, Gundogan and John Stones were first to everything. I thought Stones was unbelievable for the first 20 minutes. They were all good for the 90 minutes, but Stones for the first 20 minutes, it's as good as you'll see any midfielder ever play. I thought he was just absolutely phenomenal in winning the ball back, moving into spaces, and City's setup probably made it easy for him. But yeah, it was just a majestic performance from start to finish, really. I remember writing in, when we're at the grind, we do these updates for our matchday blog, and I remember writing into 420 minutes saying City are on top here and totally dominating the game, but they've not scored, and they need to score when they're on top. This is what Real Madrid do to you. And little did we realise at the time that they were going to be on top for 90 minutes, and it wasn't a spell they were enjoying. It was just the game, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't want this to kind of come across as like an insult or anything, or a kind of a put down, but with these Barcelona comparisons, it's sort of like, unless maybe I'm misremembering it, because obviously the peak of Pep Guardiola's Barcelona was 15 years ago now. But like, to me, even when Barcelona were at the best, and it's not like they couldn't pass the ball around the teams and just, bore them to death with that just kind of draining possession. But there was always, I kind of seem to remember, not this kind of sense of invincibility with that Barcelona. Even in that Champions League final with United, I think the second one, like United did equalise. Like there was a period where they could be getting at. There was like a drama with Barcelona. Obviously, Jose Mourinho did the number on them in the Champions League semi-final, didn't they? Like there was a bit of a kind of vulnerability a bit more, and we have said that at times. City have got that as well. But on Wednesday, Joe, it just, to me, it felt like even kind of maybe not as quite as beautiful as those peak Barcelona games, but just so brutally efficient, which that's why I didn't want that to sound kind of as a put down, because I don't mean it as that, even if it makes it seem like it's not as amazing as it was, but it was just kind of effortlessly brutal. I likened it to like an assassin sneaking into a room and just killing someone with a pillow over the head. It was just so matter-of-factly brutal and just elegant at the same time. There was no blood, no screams, no evidence, no kind of hoo-ha over the murder. It was just, right, that's done, on to the next one. It was just kind of devoid of any drama whatsoever, and I think that's why it was even kind of more impressive in a way, because while it wasn't as perhaps thrilling, I think that's fair to say, as maybe those peak Barcelona days or even City teams of years gone by, it was just effortless in a kind of way, even though obviously not. I think Walker said afterwards, like, it's absolutely not easy, you come out here and try it, but to kind of the layman's or the inexperienced looking on, it almost looked easy the way they just completely suffocated the best team in Europe ever, lest we forget.
No, I think brutal's the right word, and you just said that Real Madrid are the best team. That's what makes that performance yesterday so just ridiculous, because we've seen City dominate a side and restrict them to no passes, and they can't get out of their own half. We see it every week in the Premier League, really. You don't see Real Madrid ever play like that. Real Madrid did not have any clue how to react to that City performance. In the second half, they were 2-0 down, yes, but they were putting men forwards, but they didn't have a plan, and they were saying on the commentary on BT Sport, and it was spot on, they were just hoping something happened with Vinicius or Benzema or Rodrigo, who didn't do anything over the two legs really. And when you're bringing off Modric and Kroos and just hoping that Asensio or someone like that does something, I think their game plan was genuinely, let's get a goal back in that second half and hope that City crumble, but you just got the impression City were never ever going to do that. Even though that 2-0 scoreline has memories from last year, City just kept going, didn't they? And I mean, Erling Haaland could have had a hat-trick if Thibaut Courtois wasn't having one of the best games he's had since last year's final. And it was just, it was the fact that it was Real Madrid that kept getting me. I was like, well, we've seen City do this before, but you don't see the kings of Europe who always find a way to come back. Even in the first leg when they were under pressure, they found a strike into the top corner. They had nothing, absolutely nothing. I mean, yes, Edison made that save against Toni Kroos, but is that all they really produced? And one free kick, you don't see that. And I think that is as impressive as anything else. But I wrote a piece this morning saying, I think everyone's saying the first half was so brilliant because it was. The second half was sort of a non-event, really. Just because City managed it so well. They did it in the first leg where they didn't commit too many men forward to risk a counter-attack against them, as they did in the semi-final last year. This time, they just did everything. They made sure that Real Madrid were never ever going to come back into that game. And I think, as I said, they're sort of masters of the anti-climax. They've beaten Bayern Munich 3-0. They've beaten Arsenal 4-1, Liverpool 4-1. They've challenged United at home. Everyone's coming into these games expecting a game, a tie of the ages, a clash of the titans between these incredible players. But it's all so one-sided this season, and that's just a credit to just how ruthless and how drilled City are. And we were talking about John Stones earlier and his midfield performance. This is the player who Guardiola's not even dared to play in midfield for 4 years because it went so badly last time, and now he's popping up against Real Madrid and bossing the show from a sort of inverted defensive midfield role. It's just, it's ridiculous how everything has come together at this stage of the season. And I think it was sort of a peak performance, this one, where just everything has come together, and they've put 4 past Real Madrid in the semi-final. It just doesn't happen, does it?
No, well, I'd love to go back to the podcasts back in February or so when I believe me and Simon and perhaps yourself were talking about how they're just not getting on these runs. They usually go, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 20 games unbeaten. But are they going to do that this year? It doesn't look like it. And then all of a sudden, what are we actually on now? We must be 23 or so now, is it? Unbeaten, if not more. And it's just completely... 23, it's just ridiculous. You were saying that first 45, I think Madrid had an XG of 0.1, which was that great Cruz shot, which Ederson did well to tip over. And then other than that, they had, I think Vinicius nearly ran through, but Walker came back and got the ball off him. And then Benzema nearly got snuck through in behind, but Ederson was quick off his line. And those kind of three little flashes of, reminding us what Madrid could do made it even kind of more impressive, because this wasn't, this isn't a bad team. City were quite lucky to escape from the Bernabeu last week with the tie level, I'd say. They were really good in that first half, but they did what Ty feared they might do at the Etihad, where they had all the control and didn't really press the advantage. Madrid went in at the half ahead, and then absolutely kind of really put City's backs to the walls in that second half. But so for City to kind of come back to Manchester, and maybe the away leg at home, and we'll talk about the atmosphere in due course, really did help, because it was a raucous one, and they just steamrolled them that. And that's what makes it more impressive, because this Madrid team weren't bad. I don't even think they particularly had that bad a day themselves. They were just completely put in their place, Ty. And I know, is it Guardiola's most complete kind of European performance of any club he's been at? Because I think for City, it's absolutely no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly trumps anything he did at Bayern Munich. Maybe that second Champions League final for Barcelona. That was a phenomenal United team. That team, and Barca were majestic that day, and you're doing it in a final. So you'd have to compare it with that one, I guess, given the stakes. But certainly, it was his City masterpiece, I think, for sure. That was as well as they've ever played. I mean, they've never, I said at the end of my piece last night, they've never been this close to the treble, but they've never been this good either, which is remarkable to say when you think for 60% of the season we've been discussing why they're not that good. We're not going to count our chickens just yet, but they're as close to the treble as they've ever been in a season where we barely even talked about it until maybe March. And even then, I think most people probably had Arsenal down as more likely title winners, or certainly felt it was going to be difficult. So it is strange that it's kind of snuck up on City, but the quality of their football at the moment is phenomenal, and it does feel like they're going to take some stopping. The difficulty is matching that performance, but it does feel like they're capable of hitting those heights pretty much all the time. I mean, I mentioned to you about talking about the home record before, and it's absolutely incredible, really. They've won 26 of 28 at the Etihad this season. The only managers to get a result have been called Frank, and I don't think the other Frank's going to get a result this weekend. It'd be fair to say. I think Lampard has had his stroke of luck at the Etihad this season. 28 games, 102 goals. They've scored 4 or more against all of the big 6 in the Premier League, in League or Cup this season. 4 against Real Madrid, 7 against Leipzig. Thomas Tuchel deserves an award for keeping it down to 3. It's absolutely incredible the way they're just battering teams. And even at home in the Champions League, I think that's 26 unbeaten now at home in the Champions League. 24 wins, 2 draws in dead rubbers against Sporting and Shakhtar. They've beaten Real Madrid 3 times in that. PSG twice. Dortmund twice, I think. Atalanta when they were, everyone's favourite golden boys. Atletico Madrid, they're not just beating these teams. Often they're smashing them as well. It's incredible, really. And the Etihad is still, for rival fans, like a source of bemusement in a way, or jokes. We hear United fans sing about it all the time. Lots of fans still point at the Etihad and take the mick out of it and talk about empty seats, things that are a bit of a myth and don't really exist now. But when their teams have been there, they don't tend to be laughing, because the way City are playing at home is amazing. And you wouldn't think about it and put the Etihad on a par with, or above even, the Bernabeu or Anfield or Old Trafford or the Yellow Wall at Dortmund or the San Siro. But it is easily Europe's most intimidating stadium at the moment when it comes to the quality of the football. And the fans are having a contribution to that. It's been interesting to hear the players talk about how comfortable and confident they feel at home this season. And I think we've seen it in those away games. I thought last week that City, you kind of hinted at it there, that they played within themselves in Madrid, that they could have played better had they wanted to, but they didn't want to because they knew they didn't need to. And Real probably thought 1-1 were in this tie. In reality, they were dead last week because City are just so good at the Etihad. They knew they were just going to smash them, and it's what they did. And we've seen it. They've smashed Leipzig, Bayern, and Real Madrid at home and drawn all 3 away legs because they know if they draw away, then the tie is over basically, and that is how good they are at home at the moment. It's just a phenomenal home record this season.
Well, a word on kind of the atmosphere that night, Tyler. You were there, and on the TV screen, off the TV cameras and stuff, it sounded raucous, and I saw many describe it as like you rarely see the Etihad like this for the kind of reasons you've touched on there. But for Guardiola himself has kind of bemoaned how it can get a little quiet sometimes in kind of the less important matches. But when everything's on the line, it's as you say, it's as loud and as kind of iconic European nighty, I suppose, if you want to make that into a noun, than anywhere else.
Yeah, definitely. And it's the last few seasons it's got much better on European nights as well. I think it's the most famous stadiums in Europe come alive on European nights, and the Etihad is in that category now. I think that you do hear it raucous on European nights. It was definitely loud last night. We were talking about it post-match. I don't know whether it was as loud as Arsenal. It was pretty close. I mean, that's the best Premier League atmosphere I can remember there for a while, and it does feel like everyone's up their game this season. It certainly helped the quality of the performance, and the noise in the first 30 minutes every time City won the ball back in a good area was phenomenal, and the roars were phenomenal. And there was a lot of concern, a lot of anger from fans at the way City sold tickets, basically, and essentially putting them on general sale to anyone who registered, and quite a lot of concern about day trippers and people going to their first game, being a Champions League semi-final. It didn't noticeably affect the atmosphere at all. I think there was some concern about Real Madrid fans being in the home end from people who were on the ground. It sounded like there was a fair few turned away. We'll never know how many got in because they had absolutely nothing to cheer about. So it was impossible to tell if there was any fans in the home end. But yeah, it had no discernible effect on the atmosphere because it was loud, and there were moments. The rendition of "We're Not Really Here," I think after the second goal when it was 2-0, especially felt like it felt spine tingling in the stadium. So there were moments when it was loud, and it one thing you would say is it didn't really let up. I don't recall there being many moments of more than a couple of minutes when it was quiet and nothing was happening. It felt like for the 90 minutes there was a din and a noise there pretty much throughout.
Well, as someone whose only away games this season have been Wembley and Friday's playoff semi-final, I'm certainly not going to call anyone a day tripper, that's for sure. But Joe, compared this kind of semi-final to the semi-final a year ago, and all of City's heartbreaking Champions League exits, we've kind of become trained, and it's not just City, it's Liverpool matches, it's Barcelona, it's PSG, of course, to kind of expect these just insane comebacks and bottle jobs and remarkable turns around in the Champions League. And in a way, this unless I'm mistaken, I can't really remember anything of the sort in the knockouts this year. And City have been a main culprit of that, and they certainly won't be bothered in any respects because they're just absolutely smashing teams and going through just little to no drama or tension whatsoever. And maybe it's made for a slightly less thrilling Champions League to watch this year, but City absolutely will not be bothered in the slightest. And they've almost sailed through. I mean, the aggregate scores I've not got to hand, but I imagine they've probably won every tie by at least 3 goals at the very least. Obviously, the Leipzig one was by 6, or 7, or 8, wherever it was.
Yeah, well, if you look at the results, then City beating Real Madrid comfortably and beating Bayern Munich comfortably, that's not bad for the neutral, really. We went into that game, I was saying I've got no idea what kind of game to expect. It could be really tight and cagey like the first game, or one team could run away with it, or it could be a ding-dong battle like the second leg last year, and we got one of those outcomes, and it was just City being brilliant. And I think football fans like seeing good football, and you need to see some big teams getting humbled sometimes. I'm not saying that City are an underdog in any respect, but Real Madrid don't have a given right to do it, and they're not going to do it every single time. They got a Champions League victory last year by coming back from the dead, I think 3 or 4 times in a row. So I think neutrals will just surely admire the good football that City are playing. I mean, look at Rio Ferdinand, who isn't really a neutral. He couldn't stop sort of singing City's praises after the game because they were so good. And when you beat Bayern Munich and Real Madrid, then I don't think you can have too many complaints. And was it Bayern PSG in the last 16 as well, which got rid of PSG? That's not a bad battle of two big sides. So, I mean, it's one of those, it's that cliche, isn't it? You can only beat what's in front of you. So City aren't going to complain, but at the same time, they've beaten the two best teams. When that draw was made, when City were paired with Bayern and then potentially Real, it was, well, you've got to beat the best to win the trophy, and it can't get any tougher than that. And now suddenly it's been a bit boring now that City have just won. I don't think you can have it both ways.
No, absolutely not. As I say, City will not be bothered in the slightest. But we'll take a little break there. We're back in just a moment. So, let's talk about Bernardo Silva, eh? Back in just a second. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Talking City podcast. Now, Ty, I can't believe it's taken us over 20 minutes to get to it, but Bernardo Silva needs his flowers because what a performance! And even if he hadn't have scored the two crucial opening goals, we'd be singing his praises, I'm sure. The first one, it came just after Thibaut Courtois, which shouldn't kind of be forgotten, made one of the best saves I've ever seen to deny Haaland going the opposite way.
The best save I've ever seen live.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
It's no Jussi Escalainen in my books, but who is? But it was that, as you kind of touched on earlier, it was kind of feeling like, oh, here we go, City are controlling it, but they're not getting through. And Madrid, they've only had 20 passes and they've only got 80% possession, but they've got them right where they want them. They're going to get them at any moment. And just when that maybe creeping anxiety was coming in a little bit, I think, you said there wasn't never a moment when it let up. But I do think just before the goal, after the goal, Guardiola really got them going again. I think the nerves were maybe creeping in just a touch, and just as that happened, a minute after that save, Bernardo sneaks in through the back line and just absolutely whacks it home. There was no saving that. And then his second goal, about 10 minutes later, 15 minutes later, just the most delicate of little headers. I mean, as we say, his two goals were worthy of a man of the match performance enough, but then you've got everything else on top of it, and he was just remarkable once again.
He was, yeah. It shows you that you shouldn't rush to snap judgments early in games. After 10 minutes, I remember me and Si having a chat at the game and saying he's been a bit rash early on. Bernardo's committed 3 fouls in the first 10 minutes. Ones he didn't need to. It's allowing Madrid to slow the game and kill it down. And then 80 minutes later, there's no superlatives left for him. So we'll let him off for those fouls in the end. It was another astonishing performance, wasn't it? I mean, City's 5'8", fairly slow winger has scored headers against Bayern Munich and Real Madrid and left Alphonso Davies and Eduardo Camavinga with their heads spinning, really. It's incredible what he does and how he does it. I thought his battle with, going back to that Bayern first leg, his battle with Alphonso Davies was phenomenal because he's never going to beat him or Camavinga for pace, but his intelligence is just off the charts, for going back to classic football manager levels. If his composure and intelligence aren't 20, then someone's doing something wrong, because it is, he's just a joy to watch, really. And he pulled Real apart down that flank. His movement and finding space, his ability to find space, the way he found that space for the first goal, and sort of drifting into that area, involved in the build-up. But Stones and De Bruyne kind of made the moves to open up the space, and Bernardo just ghosted in there, and it was a lovely finish. And the quality of that second header, I mean, that was world class. When that ball's coming back at you off Courtois' leg fairly quickly, you've got defenders on the line. You're only small yourself. It's not like Bernardo's getting a lot of practice winning headers, but it was a brilliant header, and he's so good, isn't he? I mean, it feels like all of them last night deserve praise for hitting those levels, but he is absolutely phenomenal. And the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about Gundogan and won't he leave? Can City cope without him? It wouldn't be somewhere in Manchester without Bernardo Silva's future being questioned. I don't think it's a secret to anyone now that if Barcelona came calling, he would want to go. The reality is it's hard to see how they could afford any kind of package that would convince City to do business. But Guardiola's always had this policy of if a player's had enough and wants something new, then bring us an offer. And will let you go. You'd think Bernardo is perhaps the one player he might say, "Oh, sorry, I'm not really sure about that," because you really wouldn't want to lose him to that team. And whether it's playing in centre mid, whether it's playing on the right wing in these big games, he is incredible. And I know they've got some phenomenal players, and you'd put De Bruyne and Haaland up there, but when the games reach this level and this scale, it always feels to me like Bernardo might just be the first name on the team sheet for his work rate and the intelligence of his football and his ability to just make the whole thing work. He just feels like he knits it all together at times wherever he is on the pitch, whether he's at left back or right wing. He just makes it better, doesn't he?
Absolutely. I mean, you took the words right out of my mouth, because I was going to say to Joe there, like, if there was one twinge of sadness to what was an otherwise kind of glorious night in the history of City, one that'll be remembered for eons, and if they go on to win it, of course, will be etched into the history books forever. And if there was one twinge of sadness, it was the fact that this might be one of the last grand hurrahs of Bernardo and Gundogan, just dominating the City midfield together at the Etihad in a massive game. And if one or both do depart in the summer, what a way to kind of go out. And there's one more game at the Etihad left, of course, on Sunday, which we'll get to. But this was that might not mean anything by the time we get to it. So to go out, potentially go out like this. And, don't want to get anyone's fears up. You never know. Hopefully no one's coming for Bernardo yet. As Ty says, there's not a lot of funds going around. But Gundogan's future still up in the air with his contract situation, and more rumblings from Barcelona on that front as well. If this is or was the last time them to really just help, Rodri and De Bruyne and the rest of them completely dominate in midfield, Joe. I mean, just savor every moment of it, because it was just an absolute masterclass.
I think if you lose one, then that's a big blow in the summer. If you lose both, I genuinely don't know what City would do. They both have proved themselves in the last few games as so integral, and it's not a surprise that in both legs against Bayern and Madrid, it's been Rodri holding the midfield, Gundogan and De Bruyne ahead of him, pushing forward, and Bernardo on the right and Grealish on the left, and that quintet, if you like, are unbeaten in, I think, 11 games they've played together this season. Now, not always in the same positions. I think Bernardo's played at left back on one or two of those, but so it's not a surprise that in those two games against Bayern and Real Madrid, he started the same midfield of Rodri, Bernardo, Gundogan, De Bruyne and Grealish, and in 11 games now this season they're unbeaten, and you expect in the two finals City have, it's going to be those five again. You can't see anyone else displacing them, and that just shows how important they are. But I mean, last week we were saying how big De Bruyne is in these games. He scored at the Bernabeu. Before and after that, Gundogan gets a brace in the Premier League and gets 6 crucial points that will probably hand the title to City if they haven't already. And now Bernardo's coming up, so I don't know whose turn it is next in one of the finals. But they've got big players who come good at the really big stages.
Yeah, absolutely, and that just speaks to kind of Guardiola's recruitment, doesn't it? He recruits players who got big mentalities, the right attitudes, the right temperament to deal with the biggest occasions. And I saw a good point someone made on Twitter saying, like, when was the last time City got a signing wrong? And even the ones that have gone a little bit wrong, like Danilo or whatever, worked out for the best anyway, because they just got him to get Cancelo in. And I think the only one that's really gone awry was maybe Claudio Bravo. That was probably the only really bad signing City have made.
Is it too early to say Calvin Phillips?
Well, we'll
he's
talk
the
about
one
him
at the moment, isn't he? But I think if you were, to prove that, and it's not just getting signings right, it's Guardiola's ability to improve players as well. And if you put every single City player on the transfer list this summer, which is obviously not going to happen, but if you did, if they were all sold this summer, then everyone would sell for a profit, probably. Maybe with the exception of Phillips, and maybe a few age-related ones. Grealish, I think you probably still get 100 million. I guess the issue is that City are probably the only club that can really pay it. But he's certainly worth that, isn't he? Like, if City were going to sell him, it would be for £100 million plus. But you'd say, I think every player in that squad is probably worth more now than what City paid for them. which is, as much as people will always throw the money thing at City, and we were talking about Barcelona before. I think part of the reason this team doesn't get the same respect is because of what's happened and the charges and things like that. But you also look at it and the money City have spent, but the manager has improved every single player really in that team, which is part of his genius.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the charges, of course, we don't know the results of them yet from any tribunals to come, but they are an asterisk. It's hard to kind of escape that, of course, when is it 111 charges against the club. It's hard to not mention it, of course, but they're not the only club, and City have got unlimited resources. They can afford. You can splash 40 million on Phillips and it not work out, and you can sell him at a loss and then go and spend 40 million on another player, and maybe that'll work. So they haven't got as much of a risk as other clubs, but they're not the only club in the world with near or pretty much close to unlimited funds, and their success rate is just a million times better than pretty much every other one, apart from maybe Liverpool at their peak. And when you sign, when you're losing year after year, for the last 6 years, City have lost Hart, Zabaleta, Yaya Toure, Aguero, Silva, could lose Gundogan this year, and I'm sure Fernandinho, of course, this summer. They've lost either a captain or a legendary player or an iconic player or someone who's been so important to their early success every single year. And apart from maybe the year they lost company because they couldn't get a replacement in straight away, you've hardly ever noticed them going, even when they didn't get a striker in to replace Aguero for the first year. It's an astonishing hit rate, and the signings he makes, Joe, I don't know how we've gone to this little tangent, but we're here now, and we'll talk about how good City have become when we talk about, as I say, when we get onto who else has played well. But when Guardiola came, and he says it, he mentioned it himself in his press conference. When I came, everybody thought, it's harder here, it's robust, it's physical and stuff, and he hasn't kind of been snobby to that or tried to argue that or kind of fly in the face of it. He's got quite a physical, robust team as well. Every player is a real athlete, and off the top of my head, apart from Edison, Ruben Diaz and Riyad Mahrez, everyone has played in more than one position at some point. Every player he signs is just an absolute superb athlete with amazing technical kind of proficiency and just complete versatility that make, even though it's a small squad, they must have used the least players of any other team this year in about 2021 or 22. And yet they are still going strong, have only one player injured going into the last few games, and are in 2 finals.
And even the players he's had for years have just played the same position. I'm thinking Walker, Stones, Laporte even. Suddenly, they're ball-playing midfielders, and Walker's spraying diagonals across the pitch like a quarterback, and Laporte and Akanji at the weekend were basically playing as midfielders, leaving Diaz as the only defender, and John Stones, as we've touched on, is herring forward against Madrid and without a care in the world. And it's those sort of innovations that have been as impressive as anything else. Let's be fair, he's not played with a left back for about 3 years, Guardiola. He's used various midfielders or defenders in that position, and City are 3 games, maybe even 2 games away from a treble, and they've got Manu Akanji at left back at the moment, who was not wanted by Dortmund in the summer and has only really played a centre back, never played that position. It's just the versatility he can get from those players and the system that he can create around them to account for those players learning those positions as they go is as impressive as anything else. And one more point I saw about the Premier League charges is that City haven't lost since they were announced. Now, obviously, whether they're found or not found, we don't know, but clearly that's a turning point in this season where they needed something to say, right, it's been a bit inconsistent, we've got something to fight for. I think Walker said before the Real Madrid game that there was a feeling in the squad that one more draw or defeat, drop points, was probably going to be it in the title race. They just lost to Tottenham, then these charges come out, and
It's certainly good fuel to make into a sort of us against the world mentality, isn't it? And maybe they did come at the perfect time for City, as troublesome as they are. And I remembered the quote when we talked about Gundogan and Bernardo, and if they leave, and it was like, I wish there was a way to know you're in the good old days before you've actually left them. And who said that but Andy Bernard? of the office. So, let's hope City's kind of dominance continues, of course. But Ty, let's get back to Wednesday, of course. We went on a wind and twisting road there. But who else was good on Wednesday night? We showed Bernardo with praise. We showed everyone with praise. But who else was specifically good?
Ederson, Walker, Diaz, Stones, Akanji, Rodri, Gundogan. You're getting the gist of it now.
Got you about the third player. When they were in order, I was like, all right, no, that's what we're going with.
No one's coming here. Akanji was asked in the mix zone last night who was City's best player, and he just said, I can't say. They were all good. I thought Grealish was really good. There's maybe an argument to say Haaland was probably I was going to say the weakest link. That's obviously not the right word, but he was the one that missed a couple of chances. He was unlucky with the one header, but the one he planted straight at Courtois, he couldn't get his feet sorted for that second half chance. He still did a good job for the team, but City have scored 5 in the Champions League semi-final, and he's not scored any of them. So the idea that they signed him to he's going to be the difference in this team. He certainly improved them, obviously, but it does show they can cope without his goals as well. I just thought to a man they were brilliant. Like I say, I thought Stones in that midfield role was phenomenal for the first 20 minutes especially, and the whole game. De Bruyne, the effort De Bruyne puts in is unbelievable. We all know he's a bit of a moody chap, shall we say, at times now, and is probably all seen the clip of his argument with Guardiola and telling Guardiola where to go, and he's told him to pass the ball, and he looked. Just before he put the cross in for Akanji's goal, he looked absolutely dead on his feet. Which for someone who, I didn't really get a lot of attention, but someone who didn't play at the weekend, it's quite interesting how exhausted he was. Whether he's carrying something or there's something going on there, but it was surprising to see. We know how much he puts into games, but it was surprising to see how wiped out he looked in the final 20 minutes when he hadn't played. Like I say, Grealish and Bernardo, phenomenal. Defence just so comfortable, and I think there's an irony in a way that a manager who once said he wanted to play with 11 midfielders and has been obsessed with putting midfielders in defence and midfielders in attack at times has basically built maybe the best team in Europe by essentially playing 3 or 4 centre backs. And if Ake was fit, we'd probably have a team of 4 centre backs. And in a way, that's kind of what's making the difference for City. That I do think there's something in what you were saying about the Champions League before, that it's not been total chaos this year. When it turns into chaos and it kind of follows this narrative of anything can happen in games, doesn't always suit City. This year it's been a bit purer. There's only really been Liverpool, Real Madrid first leg that's been like typical bonkers Champions League games. When it's just 2 teams playing sensible football and the best team wins, then City are going to win because they're the best team. So in a way, it's suited them, and there's maybe something in that. But I think also the defensive system and going into the way they're playing with this defence, it's noticeable that Guardiola's perfectly happy to leave 3v3 at the back now, because Akanji wins every duel, Diaz wins every duel, Ake, when he's there, wins every duel. Walker had the speed on Vinicius. He's happy to play man v man, and it's he's always said previously that in the Champions League it's what happens in both boxes that cost him, and Haaland's fixed it at one end, and playing 3 or 4 centre backs in the team has fixed it at the other end. He doesn't need full backs because he basically uses them to defend now, and like we say, Akanji's played maybe 5 games now at left back in his life, but what he's doing is essentially man marking the opposition's right winger, and City will go 3v3 at the back because they know Diaz will beat Benzema, Walker will beat Vinicius, and Akanji will beat Rodrigo, and then they've got Stones and Rodri and Gundogan ready to pick up the second ball. So I do think that switching from a team of midfielders to a team of defenders has worked quite well for Pep.
Mm-hmm. Who would have thought it would translate to so many goals being scored? But Joe, quickly, is there any other players you want to kind of single out for praise particularly?
I just think, I've written the piece for the morning about Ederson, and in both ties, both legs, he's produced some really important saves at big times. That was obviously the very strange criticism of him, that he didn't create enough sort of match-winning saves that your players like David De Gea might do at times, although that comparison hasn't aged very well. And now Ederson has shown it himself that he is going to, do what his teammates can do and turn up in the big games and the big stages. So hopefully, I don't think it will be, but hopefully that is the end of what is a very boring argument of Ederson shouldn't be playing as many games as he does for City.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we have got the final. It is booked in, of course. City will be playing Inter in Istanbul on June 10th, and it's set to be quite an intriguing one. Bernardo was asked after the match what he thinks, and he said, I watched the game against AC Milan when they won 1-0 on the night to go through to the final 3-0 aggregate. He watched them play Benfica and Barcelona, and he said they're a very organised, strong team. And then Guardiola himself said this is not a nice gift playing an Italian team. There was a lot of talk on the kind of the beat from the BT pundits. This is basically the final. When City win here, they've got through and blah blah, and they've won it now. I'm sure that Guardiola or any player will have that mindset in the slightest, but it'll be important not to underestimate Inter, even if City are clear favourites here.
Yeah, it will, and they will be huge favourites for that game. I mean, Simone Inzaghi is a phenomenal cup manager. His record in cup games in Italy is remarkable, really. But this is a team that starts Matteo Darmian, Henrik Mkhitaryan and Edin Dzeko. So really there should only be one winner. It's a one-off game. We can never be sure exactly what's going to happen, but it's hard to see how Inter live with them. I was saying last night that I think arguably City's greatest impediment to the treble might be the fact that if they go to Istanbul seeking the treble and start nervously in a way like they did against Chelsea 2 years ago, I think a lot of that was down to team selection as well. I think we can all pick 10 of 11 starters for Istanbul now. It's probably only a case of Ake or Walker and who's fit. I think the rest we can pick the team now. But if they were to start nervously and Inter drag them into some kind of war of attrition, then that's maybe the only area you can see where things go wrong. You get games where a team might have 20 shots and just don't score, but you just don't see it with this City team at the moment. You can never take a 90-minute game for granted. It is, it's a low-scoring sport. Well, it normally is, unless City are playing at home, but generally it's a low-scoring sport, and that leaves it more susceptible to luck than any other game, really. And the best team don't always win tournaments and win football matches because games finish 1-0, and that can open it up to luck. And like you say, you might face a goalkeeper like Courtois who keeps out all your efforts, or Andre Onana might have the game of his life. City might miss 3 penalties. They might hit the bar 5 times. These things do occasionally happen, but when you analyse the two teams and you look at the form they're in and the way City are playing, it is hard to escape the idea that how do Inter Milan stop them, and it's it's difficult to see how they stop them, and especially when City have just done that to Real Madrid. Inter, I put in my piece last night, the celebrations in Milan were probably cut pretty short last night when they were watching that, because Real Madrid are the gold standard in Europe. 11 semis in 13 years, 29 winners' medals in that team last night, compared to Scott Carson's in the City squad, and it felt like a changing of the guard, the way that City played, and it almost felt like a coming of age night for the team in Europe. It's taken a long time in that competition, but it did feel like whatever happens in the final, it arguably feels now it should be how many do they win under Guardiola, not do they win this competition, because they are quite clearly the best team in Europe. The only question mark over that is how much longer does Guardiola stay, and obviously the charges again and what happens with them. But all things being equal, it feels like how many they should win, and I think beating Real Madrid in the way they did would give them a lot of confidence. I put it in my piece that Real Madrid are never dead in Europe, but they were never even alive at the Etihad. They were that dominated, and that should give City so much confidence going to the final, knowing that if they can do that to Real, they can definitely do it to Inter Milan.
Definitely. I'd love to know if any player's gone longer than Scott Carson's 18-year wait between Champions League winner medals. That must be a record, because I can guarantee Pep will get him on the bench, get him his medal. There's no question about that, I reckon. But Joe, that is everything Ty says there is true. But Inter have been very good defensively. During this tournament. And they do have some good threats going forward. City know Edin Dzeko very well, despite his 37. Despite his aging years, he did score a stunning goal in the first leg against AC Milan. They do have Lautaro Martinez. They do have Romelu Lukaku when he starts. They do have Bray, a very good midfielder. Of the two teams, even of the kind of four teams City perhaps could have faced, with Napoli fading away in the last few months, Inter were the hardest one out of the semi-final, the quarterfinalists on that side they could have got, and they do. I think it's funny, we see kind of names we've seen from the Premier League over the last 6-7 years. You look at Mkhitaryan and Lukaku, and we see them and we think, they're just Premier League flops. They can't do anything, but they have got to the Champions League final. I think they're the informed team in Italy at the moment. And they do have threats going forward that they're very good at counter-attacking. It will be almost a cliched sort of Inter team going in where they will just try and lock up at the back and hit City on the counter. And we have seen that City can get done every now and then when they get done quick on the turn.
Well, Guardiola said, didn't he? It's not a gift to play an Italian side in the final, and if he was going to pick a side, sort of let's say from the quarter-final lineup, he probably wouldn't have wanted someone like Inter, who, like you say, will just put men behind the ball. It's happened a couple of times this season where one shot on target has been enough to get a point or maybe more from City. So yeah, I think even City fans would probably be more nervous about Inter Milan beating them than Real Madrid, just because of that whole typical City factor. And there's always, however good City are playing, however much they demolished Real Madrid, it's still Manchester City. So for a lot of fans, they will fear that they've done the hard work and then fall at the final hurdle. And I mean, they should have beaten Chelsea, shouldn't they, in the final last time? So it's just because you're there doesn't mean you're going to win. And I just think there is a different feeling at City. Just being in the room with Guardiola before the game, where the world's media were there, and he said it doesn't matter if we win, as long as we play our best, we know we will win. If we don't, the team will win. But we know we're there, and we know that standard's there. There was just a calmness there that maybe he's been a bit more anxious and agitated before, even with Kyle Walker, who's a bit more brash, but still, I think the team know they're good enough to win it. It's not whether they're good enough, it's just whether they can get over the line. So I feel there's a bit of a different mentality in the squad this time.
Definitely, and we know we can't wait for the final, a few weeks away, but we'll put European football to a little bit of a close for now, and in part 3 we'll cast our eyes on the Premier League, because another trophy might be coming to the Etihad quite a lot sooner. See you in just a minute. Hello everybody, welcome back to the Talking City podcast. And Ty, after all of the title race and the oohs and ahs and the back and forths and could it go to the wire, or Arsenal a real challenger? And they were, in fairness, for quite some time, but not for long enough. And on Saturday it could all be wrapped up with 3 games to spare. City could be crowned champions if Nottingham Forest defeat Arsenal, which is unlikely, but you never know. But regardless, if City then defeat Chelsea at home on Sunday, they'll have it won with 2 games to spare, which I think Si mentioned quite a while ago, and both of us, and Joe as well, which looked at that double header in the last week of the season away at Brentford and Brighton as quite a potential kind of tricky one. Brentford, of course, as you mentioned, beat City earlier in the season. Brighton remain incredible at times. Now, that's not a great final week of the season, but instead they could have it all wrapped up in their last home game, and those 2 final away games of the season can be literally dead rubbers. Do play anyone who's not going to play in the 2 upcoming finals. Chill out, rest, and it couldn't have worked out better if they, of course, get it done this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I think they will get it done this weekend, one way or the other. I wouldn't be surprised if they won the title on Saturday night. To be honest, it feels over. Well, it is over for Arsenal now, isn't it? And Nottingham Forest are desperate for the points. Wouldn't surprise me if they did beat Arsenal. Hopefully for City, it will get done on Sunday, because it's always nicer to win the league under your own steam, really. And I mean, I would be absolutely astonished if Chelsea got anything at the Etihad, the way City are playing there. The weakness of Frank Lampard's teams are that Frank Lampard is the manager, but also that they're so bad off the ball, they're so open that they all look poorly coached, and they can't stop conceding goals. His Everton team was so easy to play through, and if that's the case on Sunday, then City could run up any score they want. And for Chelsea, it feels like their season's just sort of limping to this sad conclusion. They got that win at Bournemouth, but then they only drew against Forest last week, and it's hard to see. There doesn't seem a lot of fight in that team at the moment, and that's what they're going to need to show on Sunday. So, yeah, I think they will get it wrapped up. And like you say, great to have those 2 games, and be fascinating to see what Guardiola does with the team. I still think at least one of those games he'll play a strong team, probably Brentford at a guess. We know he likes rhythm in players and things like that, so I still think he'd probably play the cup final team maybe against Brentford with a full week before the semi-final. But yeah, I think there's been a narrative that's taken hold since City beat Arsenal 4-1, this narrative that this was always inevitable. But I don't think that's the case. I think people are being disingenuous when they say that this was always inevitable given City's riches and Arsenal's kind of surprise run. No one felt this was inevitable when Arsenal were 8 points clear. I think in February and March we still thought Arsenal would hold on. They were still racking up the wins. They went through a great run. When City were just starting their winning run, Arsenal were on an even longer one. So, I don't think there's been any sense that it's inevitable. That 4-1 was obviously a turning point, and Arsenal are kind of stumbling over the finish line now. So things have changed there, but I don't think this was inevitable in March at all. And before that Etihad game, they obviously lost a lot of momentum with those 3 successive draws beforehand. But Arsenal have been worthy opponents. But if City win their last 3 of the season, they're going to get 94 points, I think, which again is an amazing total, and it just shows what it takes to stop this team, really.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a lot of kind of bottle job debate, hasn't there, about Arsenal? And I think it can go both ways. I think you can't say a team was 8 points clear and then drew with, nearly relegated West Ham after being 2-0 up, and who was the other Forest they've just drawn with? No, who was the other team they drew with?
Southampton they drew with 3-3, and they were 2-0 up at Liverpool as well, weren't they?
Exactly, yeah. So you can't not say, 2-0 up in 2 games and draw them both, and then drawing with Southampton, by far the worst team in the league. You can't look at those results and not say it's a choke of some respects, but I think they've done kind of so well to kind of come this close, really. They were 5th last year. They didn't make that. Zinchenko and Gabriel Jesus were the only real kind of additions, and then Trossard at the halfway point. Arteta's done a lot with what they already had. He's made Xhaka into an actually good player, which is a remarkable feat. Saliba being injured has really cost them, and Saka has been sensational. It's so unfortunate for him. But again, the same has been a bit of a bottle job. And I think it was the point where when they coped without Jesus, I think we said on this podcast when he was injured, it's like if they can come through this and they're still in the hunt, then maybe they will do it. And then Nketiah came in and started scoring. It did seem like they would have enough, but they have just faded when it matters most. And then they haven't got as good a squad in depth or as quality as City, and maybe it is a bit expected like that. But I do think the turning point was that FA Cup win, and I think Si said it's like as soon as City, in that FA Cup, they beat them 1-0. It was Ake, wasn't it? And that, after that is when Arsenal's kind of momentum wobbled a little bit, and we thought, it doesn't really matter for Arsenal. It's a cup game. They're probably happy to be out of it. But they lost once, and they lost again, and then they lost to City again. All the big matches they lost, and it was that first one where the wobble kind of came in. But of course, Chelsea at the weekend, Joe, we can be wrapped up regardless of what happens on Saturday. Does Pep go kind of strong gear just to make sure it's finished if it's not at that point, or does Calvin Phillips finally get a Premier League start to make sure he gets that medal? No haggling over it whatsoever.
I really don't know. I think it will depend on what happens on Saturday night, and I'm hoping that it's not wrapped up on Saturday night, because I won't be able to do anything if they do win the title. I'm hoping it is done on Sunday, like Ty said, with the fans as well. It would be better, but it would also be better if the trophy can be lifted at the Etihad and the fans can get to witness that. I think if they win, he will rest a few players, maybe, like you say, Rodri, De Bruyne will get a rest. I mean, De Bruyne's still got only 2 assists away from equaling his own record in terms of assists in a season, so it depends whatever issue he has at the moment. I know Thierry Henry alluded to something, so I don't know, but it would be nice for him to get that record if possible. Haaland will probably want to extend as many goals as he can and just cement that record, even though no one's really going to get close, you would think, in the next few years. But no, I think it will depend on if they win the league on Saturday night and how strong those celebrations are. But no, I echo what you say about Arsenal and their run. I think they just ran out of steam, and those 3 games, including the FA Cup, City looked like a team who'd been here before and knew what to do. I think we might have said this before, and Arsenal definitely looked like a team who were there for the first time, and I think they just run out of steam. But I did think it would go to the final week. I'm surprised at the fact that it's gone already, basically, that the title can be won at the weekend. And we were driving back from Everton thinking we've got to prepare for this, because we thought we had another week in the bank to prepare ourselves, but it's almost certainly going to happen this weekend.
Yeah, you need to get them supplements written, because it's bound to be, the first of many, many thrilling weeks for City. Of course, the first leg of the treble could be wrapped up on Saturday or Sunday, and of course we'll be back next week to talk all about it. Well, I say we, I won't. I'm on my jollies, so I'll leave it to you, Joe, to get the next podcast started. A brief gander at the rota tells me potentially Tuesday when 3 of you are in, so maybe that'll be when we're back to discuss the game over Chelsea and if City have been crowned champions or not. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening. To keep up to date with all the latest breaking news and expert analysis and matchday coverage, you know where to go. It's manchestereveningnews.co.uk/Manchester City. You can get our Twitter at ManCityMen, and our Facebook is Manchester Evening News-Man City, as is our YouTube channel, which has just broken the magic 1,000 subscribers mark. So thank you all very much for that. If you haven't clicked that subscribe button yet, you are missing out. So get on it. Don't delay. And of course, if you've seen this in your feed, you'll be aware that and the little City extra pods popping up in that feed now as well. Get on that. I think the latest has been looking at Pep Guardiola's post-match press conference after Real Madrid. So get on with that if you so desire. Plenty of content to go around until we're back next week. So fill your boots. But until then, everyone, thank you very much. We'll see you later. Ta-ra.